Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast with me, Mark Decano. I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Line. Comedy is a collaboration between the artist and their audience. It is a subversion of expectation. It is asking questions, communicating ideas through humour. If I say all that, what are my guests going to say? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I love talking to the people in comedy about comedy. And if you like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode started doing stand-up comedy in 2021, and in 2022 he was a finalist at the Natties and BBC New Comedian of the Year, and won So You Think You're Funny. So this year he returns to Edinburgh for the Best of So You Think You're Funny showcase. It's stand-up comedian Joshua Bethania.
Hey Mark.
You're all good?
Yep, good to go, yeah.
You're relatively new to both the UK and to comedy, so I suppose the first question is, what prompted the move in both directions? What prompted the move to the UK and what prompted the move to comedy?
Well, actually, I'm not completely new to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I did live here between 2014 and 16. I moved on work and I moved back to India because just for professional reasons, it just seemed the right thing to do at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to come back, so I was just waiting for the right work opportunity. And once that came up, I sort of seized it and I came. And during this time, I never really was doing any comedy as such. I never really even thought of it.
Yeah.
In terms of why I moved into comedy, it's mostly because, so at the end of lockdown, I was just trying to figure out to do something social because I felt like I had to build my circle again. Most people I knew had left London. And I signed up to this comedy course, and at the end of it, you get to perform at one of the really good clubs in London with an actual audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole social aspect of it was great, and the comedy show went well. So I was like, oh, this sort of feels nice, and it sort of felt like I could at least do something as a hobby on the side, and never really pursued it as such because my original intention was just to get better at speaking, because I took up a role of driving meetings where I'm the main speaker and I need to get everything organized. So I thought it would help me that way. So that was mostly my intention. And yeah, I haven't looked back since.
Yeah. So having done the showcase at the end of the course, that really gave you the bug.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also, I think all the other people around you are like doing comedy for the first time as well.
Yes. And
you sort of have this little motivation of like, oh, I'm going to go try this out and like an open mic or something. And I'm like, oh, cool. Can I come along as well? And it's just nice to have other people be in the same situation as you, which makes it a bit easier to jump into it.
Yeah. So what was that, having done the course, what was that first time stepping out sort of on your own, really, without the support? What was the first gig like?
Oh, I think it wasn't too bad. Like, I think probably I had done like a couple. Actually, the showcase got a bit delayed, so my first gig was actually before the showcase. This was like when the virus kept popping up and everything started getting delayed, very randomly. So it was pretty chaotic. But there were a few people who sort of just wanted to just go on stage before the actual thing. So I did go with a few friends at that point. It was still like familiar faces.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to another place. I thought, oh, might as well just go. It was at this weird pub where people would just walk past you, order at the bar right next to the stage. So that was initially, I was wondering, oh, what am I doing? But then I think the comedy community, at least in the open mic circuit, they're all like, they just like, it's easy to introduce yourself to each other, and it's easy to just get talk about what they're up to. So that was a good insight into making random friends just because you all performed on the same night. So it sort of had a very communal feel to it. So it wasn't too difficult, even though I'm a massive introvert and don't speak to people much.
So having done a few gigs, was it everything that you anticipated, or did you run up against any surprises?
I think Surprises. I think the surprise was how well it was going initially. I didn't think it would go well. But I guess surprises are more like, when I always just assumed rooms would always be packed with people.
Right.
And sometimes you do some gigs and there's like a handful of people. It's quite chaotic. It's a bit noisy. Crowds respond in different ways. So those were more like little surprises that came along the way. Nothing which was like, whoa, this is mad. So so I would classify those as surprises.
Yeah. Listening to you talk now, you have a very relaxed demeanor, and that's the demeanor that I see you performing on stage. So how much of your stage persona is just you?
I think it's completely me, but I'm not really relaxed on stage, to be honest. I'm most of the time I have sweat dripping down my back, and so what I tried to do in the past is, and I still do quite often, is basically record myself and see how I do. So I sort of know I've been very nervous, and I know there were instances where I thought I was losing breath or losing my voice. And then when I look back at the recording and I see like, oh, okay, actually, it doesn't look all that bad. It looks quite, I look like I'm in control. And I thought, okay, so every time I feel nervous, I just try to remind myself it looks okay to them. It doesn't, that it's not showing. So which is kind of a nice, a nice thing for me to have. I think there was one moment where I lost my voice when I look back at the recording. I noticed because I knew it was going to happen, but I guess people who don't really know me may not really recognize that, oh, that's what was happening on stage. So I just tried to trick myself that it's fine to the audience.
Do you get nerves and anxiety before every performance, or does it alleviate over time?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely a bit easier. It's a bit harder when you've got like a big club that you sort of get a spot after a really long time, and you just want to impress people, mainly the bookers. Sometimes you might see a very big name on the lineup, and like, oh, okay, I should probably do my best. Like otherwise, they're probably just gonna think that, oh, this is just another comedian, open mic comedian. So it's sort of like just this mindset that maybe I don't know, it's just a general people pleasing. But I feel like I'm slowly fading out of that need to, like this year, I've really been trying to be bold enough to fail on stage, no matter what the situation is. Because if I keep doing the same things again and again, it just becomes quite repetitive, a bit boring for me as well. And I want to enjoy doing it. So, I mean, also, like, to be honest, like I was a bit lucky in the sense that I managed a bit of early success. And so the confidence is a bit easier. It's like, I don't have the need to be like, okay, I should be the best on the lineup. It's more like, I just want to get this joke to work. So I sort of try to focus it that way.
What about, what about themes of your material? I mean, I've seen you talk about India, talk about the English, talk about colonialism, you talk about football. So, I mean, when you choose something that you want to talk about, is it about getting the humor first or finding the topic that you want to get the humor out of?
That's a good question. I never really gave it too much thought, but initially it was like, I felt like, oh, I should, when you start off, the problem with when you're an open mic comedian, you watch a lot of shows, right? Like things on Netflix. And you say you want to be like them, but what you don't realize is you don't have that history of being successful where they can afford to be the way they are, and you think you want to emulate them. And if you're a nobody, you can't really do that. So I kept thinking that, oh, I should have this need to to say something valuable to people, that it's my responsibility to say something worthwhile. So I started off that way. So that's why I sort of like touched upon like things like colonial, and it's also a bit very relatable when you bring up India and you bring up England, and that's like, okay, there's that big history that you sort of have to touch upon. So it started off as topics. Then over time, it's just sometimes I would think of random things that were funny and write it down and see what can come out of it. And I'm sort of slowly trying to get more personal about my life, because some of the more observational jokes another person would have the same thought, which cannot necessarily be unique. So I think I'm trying to make it a bit more personal about my life, which will be unique to myself. So but that's a good question. Like, I didn't really think of things that way. My intention is
Well, what about the style you mentioned there about obviously being observational? So doing club sets, and obviously you can't get into telling a long story. Is that something that you want to be more of a storyteller, or are you specifically an observational comedian? Do you wanted to do that from the outset?
I don't think I can. Like, I tried like doing small stories, but I feel like I'm not a good storyteller. I think observation sort of seems more my speed. Like, I was literally talking to someone earlier this week, and he was saying that I really struggle with making a narrative, especially if it's a conversation between two people. That's part of the story. I struggle to sort of put that conversation across on the stage, like representing two characters. So I think I'd love to be good at storytelling. I don't know if I've got good stories. Probably that's maybe I do. I try to simplify it quite a bit. I did experiment here and there some stories. I don't think it's been that great. I probably just have to get a bit better with how I write things before I get into storytelling.
Did you know the kind of comedian that you wanted to be when you were starting out, when you went to do your course and what have you? You had something in mind?
Yeah, I think there are like a few inspirations for me. One is I didn't want to not be myself on stage. So I was pretty sure of. I didn't want to put on an accent or put on like pretend to be who I am on stage. I just want to like use my regular voice. I didn't want to like dial it up here and there. Like, this is how I speak on stage, and this is how I speak to people as well. And yeah, like I was sort of like quite influenced by people from the past. I think comedy sort of like people like Russell Peters, who was just more like, he was so clever and he sort of had an insight into everything. And in the present, it's more like people like Sindhu, who's I'm obviously picking a lot of Indian names, and like her situation was quite inspiring to me, because she was also someone who moved to the UK, started comedy quite late in her life as opposed to most younger comedians. And she still has that authenticity of being Indian, so I really enjoyed that aspect, because they're not like faking it. They're pretty much themselves on stage. And I wanted to be that.
What about cultural themes? So you mentioned about being inspired by other Indian comedians. What about Indian cultural themes? What works well with a UK audience, and what do they not understand or not pick up on, if you found that at all?
No, I think a lot of people get it. But I think the whole, like, obviously there was this running joke. I have this one joke at first where I used to I'll do a whole bunch of colonial bits and end it with, or if you grew up studying in an English school, that joke is about colonialism, basically on the trope that it's not really taught in English schools. But I think I started doing a bit more colonial bits, and I feel like a lot of people didn't really know a lot of things, so that there's actually some truth into awareness. I thought it was just like a joke But so some of those aspects does affect the joke. So it's like, oh, okay, what are you talking about? And I sort of talk a bit about like India's partition as well, and how it sort of what the role of Britain was during that time. So things like that sort of doesn't go well noticed. But all the other things, I just assume the audience won't know, and I try to explain what it is and maybe simplify some of those things. And those are jokes that I can't really do to an Indian audience because they're like, oh, okay, we already know what you're saying, so it doesn't really make sense.
Right.
So I just assume that nobody really knows what I'm talking about and try to explain it before sort of getting into it. It sort of adds a bit of time to my set as well. It's helpful.
What about the comedy industry? How it works? That you've gone in the avenue whereby you do the course, you do the open mics, and you do your 10s, your 15 spots. Is that the route that you've found easiest, or the route you were guided into, or you just naturally fell into?
I think it was all of those, to be honest. Like it's just seeing what everyone else is up to and just doing what they do.
Right.
Obviously, in your first year, you just focus on like your first 5, and then your intention is, okay, let's make it my 10. But in your first few years, there's just so many competitions that pop up and tend to typically be either a 5-minute or a 7-minute competition. So you just keep doing things that have always worked, and you sort of stick to that, and you keep focusing on that, and you sort of practice those again and again with different audiences. And I think once, like I'm like totally trying to get out of the competition mode. I probably might do at max one more later, but probably not. I wouldn't want to actually do more competitions, but I know that people start with their 5, then go to their 10, and I think most clubs tend to target like 20 minutes is like the big the max amount that you do in a club, and then obviously go on to do an hour show, which is sort of just seems like the natural progression of things. It's mostly what I'm seeing other people do. I think what people do is like, oh, I did my first 10, I did my first 15, I did my first 20-minute set. And then they move into split. I did my first split bill, and they're like, oh, then I did my first hour show. So it's sort of like, it just seemed natural. Like, okay, you're basically building your material up to an hour. But I mean, that's the mindset I have, but I'm still sort of contemplating what it means. Like I've not seen the industry enough to have like a foresight into how it may end up. But I think what I've noticed from a lot of people is they like building up to an hour is not necessarily the goal, right? Some people just end up doing like just 15-20 minutes, and with the internet you just aim to just put it online and build your following out of it rather than aiming for a show, and then you can focus on shows also at other times. So I don't know if targeting a show should be the ultimate goal. You could like just target regular club sets as a goal and just build up and go into that direction as well. So that is it's quite an interesting debate with some people who sort of see a bit of who foresee what things may be. It's different, but basically I picked up everything from everyone else on the circuit.
So what's your mindset at the moment? Are you thinking, a year from now, 2 years from now, you'll have your debut hour, or are you thinking that you just want to work the circuit and do your 20?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely do an hour. Next year, I am sort of progressing into a few work in progresses. Actually, literally next week, and probably a couple next month. So this year, I'm going to see what an hour looks like. At the moment, like I don't know if it should be an hour because it's a bunch of disjointed things about me. that could function independently as well. It doesn't have to fit into the theme of an hour. But you probably want to see how these turn out, how these work in progresses turn out, and if there is meaning behind all the jokes that I'm doing, and it sort of brings out a theme or brings out a particular thing. And in general, I think a lot of people in the industry have that expectation that, oh, cool, when are you doing your show? Right? Because that's a marketable thing. You can sell it as something to people to show up and sit for an hour. So I'll still stick to the old form of building up to an hour, and then maybe let's see how the work in progresses go. Hopefully I'm able to come up with things.
You mentioned about competitions there, and you said that probably wouldn't do anymore, but you've done pretty well in recent competitions. How do you feel about competitions in general, about their value and about the accolades that come out of it?
I think it definitely gave me a leg up in many things, the competitions, obviously, because one is people pay attention to what you do, and they end up following it up with, hey, you want to perform at this other place which I run. So that's very helpful to have that reputation. And it also helps with like your CV in general, right? It's just your credentials when you reach out to a booker who has no clue who you are, and you say like, oh, I've done this is where I finished, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I would assume that you're a decent comedian and they'd be happy to have me over. But I like, I've seen people like let it consume their lives, which is I've been like, I've obviously been lucky enough to do well, but I've also been conscious of not letting it completely affect who I am if I don't do well. So some people like really it lets it affect them very badly if it doesn't go well. But there are a lot of comedians in the industry who've just gone up without doing any competitions, and they've just done well and focused on being funny. So it does give you that initial leg up, a little boost, but it's not the be all and end all of being successful in the comedy industry, because I've definitely seen people who've not done well in competitions at all, but have been very successful comedians.
So you think you're funny, which means that you'll be at Edinburgh's showcase, best of. So you think you're funny.
That's right.
Is that your first Edinburgh outing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, last year I was there to do the So You Think You're Funny semi-finals and finals.
Yes.
So I've sort of seen, like, watched a few shows and just did a few spots here and there. While I was there, I was barely there for a couple of days, literally. Went there, did my semi-final, came back. Then again went to the finals and came back. So yeah, this will probably be the first time it's like a full-fledged Edinburgh stay. So yeah, let's see how it goes. I'll probably get homesick in like 3 days, but that'll be a good test, good mental strength test to see how it works out.
Yeah. I mean, what do you know about the Edinburgh experience? What are you expecting?
I know. So the thing is, in my case, I am not really doing a lot of admin effort, right? It's not. It's a show run by Gilded Balloon, and they're pretty much taking care of everything. All I'm doing is maybe just a bit of social media advertising and just showing up and performing. Didn't even have to worry about many things like my stay and my transport. So, like, I have a sense of that there's nonstop shows to watch. So I'm definitely gonna like just watch as much as I can. Especially there are a lot of people who I admire performing as well. Probably just go see their shows. And some actual fringe acts who are like acts that you don't normally see. So, and yeah, I know it's going to be like nonstop comedy. So I might get sick of comedy very quickly as well. But but yeah, I think I've got a sense of what it may be like. But I don't have the stress that most comedians have, like things like flyering and preparing the admin work, running the gig, running your show, and figuring out how many people do you need to manage the tech and things like that. So this is probably, I'm just gonna like go there, do my set, and leave just like any other comedy show. So I won't have that painful experience of it, but yeah, I'll be there the whole month.
You mentioned there about going to watch comedy, possibly even to the point of being sick of it.
Yeah.
So since you do comedy yourself, do you go and see comedy as well? Generally, do you go and watch live comedy as an entertainment?
Yeah, I think this year I've been trying to do that a lot. Also, just to see how people are going about their shows. Obviously, when certain famous comedians come, I try to like keep an eye out and buy tickets for them for their show. But like lesser known acts, like even like Friends for that matter, I try to like, one is either just supporting them, right? Like especially if you're close friends, and they sort of need an audience. I just show up, like just sort of support, and sometimes I just want to see how people structure their shows, how they do their shows. And just go watch it, like even like the early stages where it's very work in progress. So yeah, I try to just go there. If it's accessible at a convenient time, I just go watch it and probably would just leave. So
are you able to laugh, or does the comedian mindset kick in and you have to analyze and dissect what they're doing?
I think I do laugh, or I do switch. Like I know a lot of comedians who say things like when they hear something really funny, they don't laugh, but in their head they say like, oh yeah, that's a good joke, right?
Yeah.
And as a performer, that's not what you want to hear, the laughter. So I think I just sit there and enjoy. I don't really like note down mentally as well, like what exactly is working, what is not doing, or what could. I mean, if it's my friends who I've sort of shared writing sessions with, I sometimes immediately take a note and literally send them a message. Hey, I don't know if you're up for like you could probably do this tag or probably make this joke. So yeah, but like I wouldn't do it like unsolicited. But like I know, I mean, they are pretty unsolicited, but I know that they'll be okay with me suggesting those. But I do think of here and there some jokes of things, unless like I feel like there's a very simple joke and I'll be like, hey, can I suggest a joke for what you just did that bit? And I think most people are quite accepting of it. So yeah, I mean, here and there it does kick in terms of what like how I would have said that joke. And sometimes, but mostly I just sit and enjoy what's being said on stage.
Yeah. What about emceeing?
Oh, I've never emceed. I've probably emceed once, but I think it was like a Brighton Fringe, like a split bill. I went early. The other person who was supposed to come was he was not there yet, and usually if there's two of us, at least one person sort of uses the mic backstage and sort of goes up front and starts performing. I sort of tried to be both because I was the only one there. I sort of announced myself, and like I don't have that the ladies and gentlemen get ready, and things like that. That energy, I don't bring the energy on stage. I'm more like a subdued performer. But yeah, I've mostly seen MCs who got like high energy, and they that energy is visible and it spreads to the room. But yeah, maybe at some point I will try, but I've never really tried it so much at the moment, because I do struggle with a bit of audience interaction as well. Like I feel like sometimes the words get lost in the way people say things, or the way I say things.
Right.
So I don't have that MC confidence yet, but I'll probably give it a go at some point. But so far I've mostly been like just focusing on being a performer rather than MC.
Yeah. So in your focus of being a performer, what are the most important lessons that you've learned so far?
Oh, I think um, so very hard question. What I've learned, probably if the material is good, uh, yeah, I think having strong material is very important. Like especially if you're not a performer, sometimes like when you've got a lot of stage charisma, you can probably get away with not actually even having jokes because you are engaging the audience in some form, right? And it's not to say it's a bad thing. It's probably a good thing. Like I don't think I do a lot visually on stage.
Okay.
So I really depend on the joke writing just to sort of get it right. And yeah, just I think the authenticity. Like sometimes when I see some performances, when I see them on stage versus how I speak to them off stage, it feels very different. I mean, not that you have to be exactly who you are on stage, like especially if you're doing character comedy. Like I know you're getting into character of who that person is.
Yeah.
I feel like audiences can sometimes see through that, and it's very important to not to actually be yourself on stage, which is quite helpful. Probably don't say things that you'd regret, especially off stage, to be honest.
Right.
On stage is fine. You could probably get away with it. You're like, oh, I was just testing out a joke. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Although these days that's not necessarily the case. But like, I think just with people, like, don't badmouth people or don't assume that even if you've made an assumption of someone's comedy, that this is how you feel about them. It's just better to just be supportive of everyone, and like no matter how you feel against the person, like in a negative way, it's just best not to say it at all.
Yeah,
because people would change. You sort of end up getting into this place where like, okay, people, this is my opinion of this person, and I'll always look at this person this way.
Yeah.
So that's probably that. In terms of my performances, probably learning to be. I think I'm learning to be able to bomb on stage. I think that's been very hard, starting off. Like if I'm trying new material and it's not going well, I immediately fall back to some tried and tested stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like trying to like power through by being unfunny on stage, which is very important, and everyone has to go through that, no matter what.
You mentioned about some of the people who inspired you. Are there people among your peers, sort of up and coming comics, that continue to inspire you, where you draw strength from each other?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are quite a few people who are now very close friends. And they're always like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
Some people who I've seen, like, they're always like trying something new, very experimental. And there are some people who are always bad on stage, but they're intentionally being bad. You know what I mean? Like it's because they're absolutely confident that they're going to try this bit out until they get it right. And I've seen them like much later on do that same bit in a much more refined way. So I guess people who are not afraid to try new things on stage, people who are hard workers in terms of like whatever it means, like booking onto shows or going to see comedy or just like always putting something online with their jokes. Then people who are just like nice and supportive to each other. I feel like sometimes you see someone, especially you see someone who's super successful, and you're like an open micer there, and they're just like very supportive, and they're like much nicer to you. There's no like heavy-headedness. They're like, oh, I'm a bigger comedian than you. They're like, they just like, okay, we're both human beings here, like, and they help out with any advice, or they're like quite encouraging, like really loved what you're doing. So sort of that way. They don't look at people as threats, so to speak, or they're not like the pride is not there that I'm a better comedian than you. So those sort of people are very inspiring to look up to.
Yeah. So what so far have been your best and worst experiences in comedy?
I think best ones are probably for me. I've had a few where I've sort of thought, oh, this is going to be an awful night, and it turned out to be amazing. Like probably the King Gong at Comedy Store. It was so brutal that night, and I was like, not really. I didn't really know if, the audience is drunk, and I like, you might know what gong shows are, where like if you're not doing well, people get to literally card you off stage mid performance.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, okay, this is going to be quite mad, and I'm not a big personality that sort of would engage with the audience a lot, especially a rowdy audience.
Right.
And yeah, I just went there and I started doing my thing, and everyone just got on my side. I think what I realized is they support the underdog, and yeah, it was an amazing night. I think that was like one of my best things, and I just put the whole thing on YouTube, and like I use that to send when I'm booking gigs. I send that video. Probably the worst gigs are. I don't know. I think sometimes it's just more like I think I remember one where I had like complete set of new material to perform. It was like a pretty dingy room. There were not a lot of people, and this is like, I mean, obviously I had like a lot of bad gigs when I first started off, but not so much that it hurts me in a way, because I know like, okay, I have no success in the past, so it's expected to do badly right now. But then when you reach a bit of success, you sort of have a little self-expectation that, okay, I will do well in this room. And I feel like I'm seasoned enough to be able to handle, like my jokes are good enough to impress people. And then there was this one room, it was a pretty dingy room. There was not a lot of people in the audience, probably about maybe 10 or probably even less than that, or maybe 15, I'm not sure. I think I was like the second act. The MC goes on, straight away does a lot of sexist material. And the audience just switched off. Right. And so I was like, I had this new material plan. So I started off with a bit of new material, not landing. I was like, okay, I don't really know if it's the jokes or the audience. Then I went back to tried and tested stuff that absolutely kills in like some of the best comedy clubs, and they just switched off. They're like, I'm not going to laugh tonight. And it was kind of funny as well. Like looking back, like it's not like I felt terrible after it,
right?
But it just felt like, oh, okay, this is people they had switched off, and it was fine. Like just powering through, like even 10 minutes can seem like an eternity of zero laughter. So that was quite a painful experience to go through.
Yeah. Do you set yourself objectives? For example, by the end of this year, I want to get on a bill with this comedian, or in 2 years, I want to play this venue. Do you have those kind of targets?
No, I think my targets are mostly like, at least I told myself, I don't know if I really aim towards progressing it. My targets are usually minutes of material. When I started off this year, I thought, I originally started off as like, I don't really want to do a show as such. I thought I'll build up to 30 minutes of material and just put it online and see what happens. Right. It's more like a bit of brand building.
Right.
And because like I've noticed that's quite something that a lot of Indian comedians do in India these days. They're not so much building up to a show. They're building up towards like generating some video that's like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, put it on YouTube, and obviously splice it down for the social media aspect. And it's all about just getting yourself known in the field and building your following. So that was my first intention. But as and when I kept writing, then I thought, hey, let's just try a spill. And then suddenly I realized, hang on, I could probably do like an hour of stuff. And when I started speaking to people, they tend to ask, hey, have you done an hour? Like, I'd like to come and see an hour of your show. So sort of that seems like a bit of an expectation from agents or bookers. So I thought, okay, let's just see if I'm capable of holding the audience for an hour. Can I hold their attention for an hour? So that's definitely, so my goals have certainly changed. What I thought would be 30-minute video is now like a 1 hour work in progress. So I don't know. Obviously, I've switched off that goal of having a video online. So it's let's see where this 1 hour show goes. If it's worth being a show by itself, or it should be broken down into smaller YouTube videos. Maybe I'll probably figure that out. So I don't really have a goal at the moment. I think the goal at least my goal out of the Edinburgh Fringe is to have 60 minutes of non-work in progress material, like jokes that I think are completely refined and like tried and tested, and it works well. And then start doing like previews for, I don't know, for whatever is appropriate.
You mentioned about comics in India. Is comedy a big thing in India?
It's slowly picking up quite a bit. Like I think maybe I think when it's been there obviously for a while, but like the people who are absolutely famous right now have been doing for the last 15, 20 years or so. But now there are a lot more open mics, a lot more comedy clubs, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years. And people are really getting successful quite a bit. Obviously, there are some cities where it's mostly in the big cities. Like you don't really have people going to some far off town like how they do here in the UK, where like I've been to places that I never knew existed. So it's mostly in the big cities. And even in the big cities, it's not necessarily as active in terms of how it is, because like even from an audience perspective, like they're trying to get used to the idea of stand-up comedy. I mean, obviously most of the comedy that people have seen is mostly because of like Netflix or basically just the internet. Whereas club comedy can be quite different from what you see on TV, which a lot of people don't realize. There's a reason when you see a Netflix special, and a lot of people tend to say, oh, why does this person have a Netflix special? And what you don't realize is because you've not seen them perform at clubs and how they always do amazingly well. The whole room goes nuts, right? And so that mindset may not completely be there yet, but I mean, I don't know, to be honest. Like I've not really performed a lot. This is mostly from secondhand conversation people have had. And I think in India, comedy also can be quite sensitive. There's not a lot of room to be controversial or like really push the boundaries like politically or just any content for like just being like what's the word, like talking about material that's very sexual in nature, or it can be it's a bit hard to go down that route and have people enjoy it. So I don't know. We're still like quite early stages. I think it's just probably just a matter of time before it becomes a bit more loose in terms of the expectations.
So when we come and see you at the So You Think You're Funny showcase in Edinburgh, what can we expect from you and your compatriots?
So it's probably just things I've been writing on in the last year or so. There might be themes from the old stuff I used to do. And I'm hoping I can do like at least 3 different Club 20s across the night, because there's like a whole bunch of, I think about 14 or 15 nights that we're doing. And I think we're all like very different people, all 3 of us. So it'll be quite a mixed bag show. I don't know, like, to be honest, like I feel like if you'd asked me a month ago, I said like, okay, I'd probably do these set of jokes. But I think just in the last month, I've just been randomly having like spikes of inspiration and just written a whole bunch of things that lands really well. So I'm just going to do everything I have, like all my jokes ever. Obviously not in one night, but sort of break it down into different nights. Yeah, so it won't be limited to colonialism. So I do want to like step out of like not doing that. That was mostly my initial brand, but I don't really do so much of that anymore.
So how can we find out about you, and how can we find out about where you're performing?
I'm most active on Instagram, and in that is Joshua Bethania _comedy.
Yep.
And I've got a link in my bio. I try to keep that updated as much as I can for shows. And sometimes even if I don't, like if I'm sort of tagged for a show, I do tend to like post it on my stories or on my posts. But my link tree is generally quite well updated with the shows and the links and the details that it goes to. I'm usually there in all forms of social media, but Instagram is the more active one in terms of what it shows. All the other ones are just mostly just to have a presence that, okay, this is my content and I'm just putting it here. I'm not really active so much on those. Yeah.
And so finally, the question I always ask at the end, Joshua, can you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Oh, I should have prepared for this. Like, like I was trying to ask this to someone because I had a, like, before I answer, there's more like there was like a photo shoot, and I think they took it up as a challenge to give us something that describes you, and we'll try to build like a poster or some editing over your photo to represent that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it seems quite arrogant for me to like talk about myself. I just asked my friend, I think one of my friends said, quietly incendiary. What's the word? Is that the word?
Incendiary, yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's I guess trying to imply that, incendiary, right? It's basically like, I think what her intention was to say that I sort of subtly, like there's a bit of low expectation in terms of what I go on stage, but I tend to like, oh, okay, I didn't expect this from you sort of situations, which was pretty nice of her to say. But yeah, that's probably what I would go with. Not my words. So yeah.
Joshua, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Malcolm.